Welcome back, everyone. Today we are discussing simple, straightforward, and effective ways to improve your gameplay in the lower ranks. I want to turn Heralds into Guardians, Guardians into Crusaders, and maybe, just maybe, Crusaders into Archons as well. Optimizing your health and mana regen by backpacking your stat items is fantastic if you're ancient, but it's inconsequential and probably impractical for someone who doesn't even have an objective in mind for the laning phase. So let's get back to basics and focus on the fundamentals. This video will cover things that you need to improve for both long-term and short-term success, and a breakdown of every role in the game. I'll also recommend some heroes and items for you. First, let's go over the general strategy for winning Dota. The game can basically be broken up into three phases. The first is laning phase, where players are battling over who can have the best start to the game. Focus on amassing as many last hits on your cores as possible, while denying golden experience for your enemies. Nothing matters more than the lane creeps in this portion of the game. The second phase of the game, or the mid-game, tends to begin with the destruction of a few Tier 1 towers. The objective in the mid-game is to secure map control, with the eventual goal of eliminating Tier 2 towers until you have access to the enemy base. Now that the map is more open, vision plays a key role in outmaneuvering your opponents. Cores should typically still be farming in this stage of the game, but the entire team ought to take advantage of lanes pushing into the opponent's side of the map and attempt to control offensive positions together. The third phase of the game is the late game, and this is all about breaching your opponent's high ground, destroying barracks, and closing out the game. For simplicity's sake, think of taking Tier 3s and barracks as prizes after one team fights on the map. You should still play in a manner that's similar to the mid-game with an emphasis on map control, and try to catch enemies unaware. If you really want to attempt a high ground push without a prior team fight, suggest doing Roshan to your team first. With that overview out of the way, we can now move on to what you ought to be routinely improving over the long term. These are the fundamentals of Dota, and I know that they've been repeated time and time again, but that is because being adept at these things helps you climb to the highest ranks. They are farming, map awareness, and game knowledge. Farming doesn't just mean last hitting well, although that is the main component. What I've witnessed, all the way up to Divine games, is that players often don't farm enough. You know the feeling of having a map with no vision and the enemy team has just come out on top in the last couple of skirmishes? Your team is sitting back, unsure of where to go because every dark corner of the map feels unsafe. My advice is to farm anyway, but try to do so in the complete opposite area of where you think the enemy team is. If you suspect that the enemies are camping in your jungle, the absolute safest area to farm on the map would be the neutral side camps in the off lane on their side of the map. If you suspect that the enemies are camping in your triangle, this area with your ancients, then the safest area to farm would be somewhere in or around the safe lane. I can expand on these ideas in future videos, but the takeaway is that you should not allow the enemy team to starve you of gold. The next skill that you should routinely be improving is your map awareness, primarily by using your mini-map. What you're looking for are enemy heroes that are showing or missing, and you're using that information to evaluate danger. Dota's a lot like driving when you think about it. When you drive, you're supposed to check your rear view mirror every 5 seconds. Checking your minimap in Dota should be no different. I don't expect everyone to always glance at their minimap that often, but remind yourself to do so every 10 seconds at least. The final discipline for your long-term improvement is game knowledge. Having an understanding of the different heroes in the game will allow you to play better against them. The best ways to learn are by doing and by observing higher level players. If you keep losing your lane to a particular hero, then go try that hero out for yourself. It can even be against bots or in the demo mode, just to get a feel for its damage and cooldowns. If you want to quickly level up your own play on a particular hero, then I recommend opening Dota Buff and checking that hero's page. You'll find which facets and talents have higher win rates, and you'll also see what successful players are building on the hero. Think about why those choices might be leading to success, and if they make sense to you, try them out for yourself in your next game. That concludes the general lessons for farming, map awareness, and game knowledge. Putting time into these aspects of the game will vault you across skill brackets like nothing else. So if you are serious about improving at Dota, then always work on improving these things. Now for the role breakdowns. As a support player, you need to work on your vision, your early aggression, and your spell usage. In my opinion, it doesn't matter whether you are hard support or a soft support. There's no significant distinction between the roles until higher levels of Dota. Both roles can and should buy observers and sentries and take care of vision as they see fit. My belief on getting vision on the map is that while it is useful, it's not worth dying over. In Dota's current state, you give up a lot of gold to the enemy team when they kill you, so don't risk running into a dark portion of their side of the map when their heroes are missing. You can settle for wards up to the river in a closely contested game, and then when your team moves out together, you can place a deeper ward. Always try to keep one observer and one sentry in your inventory, and then use it in a situation like this. You should be specific about where you want to ward. Blanketing the whole map is impractical and unnecessary because the enemies can only be in so many places at once. For the time being, think about what vision would immediately help you. Do you need to keep your team safe? Maybe your jungle is exposed after losing a tier 1 tower, so you can ward above one of the jungle staircases in that direction. Is your team grouping up to push after a good laning phase? Well, if your objective is the next tower in the lane, then you can ward above or behind it to see how many opponents are attempting to defend it. Or, if your allies are particularly bloodthirsty, then you can ward in the enemy jungle, and then pounce on whatever hero separates from their team to farm neutrals. The next topic for supports is about playing aggressively early on, but then having patience later. While laning, your goal is to either make sure your carry is safe, or to disrupt the enemy carry. The best way to do this is by attacking and pressuring the enemy. Pulling is not a priority. Focus on harassing enemy heroes and winning trades. Abuse your attack range if you're a ranged support versus melee heroes. Trade your mana for their health consumables to get an advantage in the war of attrition. You want to be a bully in the lane. However, after laning phase, you'll need to reevaluate how you play. Identify which core you function best with and play around them. If you are an off-lane Jakiro and you had a great time with your allied Underlord, then there's no need to suddenly start playing with your carry Medusa. You and Underlord can and should maintain your momentum and move around the map together. Maybe you're safe lane support, and now your carry is sticking to the jungle. You obviously don't need to follow them around from camp to camp, so leave a ward at the entrance to the jungle, and then link up with your mid-death Prophet if she's playing aggressively, or go join that off-lane duo that seems to be controlling the map so well. The final topic for supporting is on spell and ability usage. Think about whether any spells or items need to be reserved for specific scenarios, such as saving a core. Suppose that you're Lion and you have a Drow Ranger as your carry. The enemy team has a Phantom Assassin. When a teamfight breaks out, don't be tempted to chain stun the nearest enemy with both your Earth Spike and your Hex, unless it happens to be the enemy carry. Assuming that it isn't, save your Hex for when Phantom Assassin jumps on Drow Ranger. I typically have the most success on support when I prioritize saving my carry. That involves good positioning, patience, and discipline to not fire off every spell as soon as possible. It also comes from good planning. I know what to anticipate from having looked at their heroes and thinking about how they match up versus ours. On the topic of good positioning, make sure that from the mid-game onwards, you're playing safely and outside of enemy vision. You'll unknowingly run across an enemy ward every now and then, but when your team is pushing or you sense a teamfight brewing, use trees and fog of war to stay as hidden as possible. If you're wondering what heroes to play as supports, I recommend Lion, Ogre Magi, Jakiro, Lich, Warlock, and Witch Doctor. These heroes can be played very safely, they have fairly easy to use or forgiving spells, and they can also dish out a ton of damage. I don't want to recommend a hero like Shadow Shaman over Lion, because Shadow Shaman's Shackle ability can leave you exposed if you're not positioned well. On Lion, don't hesitate to use Finger of Death early. I would rather see players getting maximum damage out of the ability than saving it for a secured kill. You risk dying or the enemy being saved by their allies the longer that you wait. On Ogre Magi, don't forget that you can Bloodlust towers. Igniting a creep wave and Bloodlusting a tower is often all you need to fend off a push. On Jakiro, just hang back. You can get multiple ice paths off in a team fight because of its low cooldown. On Lich, you can save Sinister Gaze for saving your carry, similar to what we discussed with Lion and his Hex. On Warlock, do your best to apply Fatal Bonds before you use Chaotic Offering. That extra damage can turn the tide of many fights. On Witch Doctor, there's no rush to consume Gree, his innate neutral item. I advise consuming it sometime between Tier 3 and Tier 4 jungle neutral items, and don't forget to get one of those afterwards. For items, I recommend Arcane Boots, Glimmer Cape, and Force Staff. If you can get Arcane Boots in laning phase, you and your core can throw out more spells, either cementing your advantage or perhaps reversing a bad lane. Glimmer Cape is tremendous for escaping into the trees or for bulking up a target against magic damage. The magic damage barrier is a separate instance from the invisibility buff, so don't worry if your target is still attacking and breaking invisibility. Magic damage will still be absorbed. Force Staff is another tremendous escape item. If you're versus Ricky, for example, you can use it to escape his smokescreen. Or if you see an ally getting hoof stomped by Centaur Warrunner, you can Force Staff them away before more spells are used against them. As an offlaner, you have to make the enemy carry uncomfortable in lane, become bulky, and be a nuisance to the entire enemy team later on. While laning, your job is to disrupt the enemy carry's farm while securing your own. The best way to do this is by aggroing creeps, liberally using your spells, and trading damage. Aggroing creeps can easily be performed in the off lane because you don't have to worry too much about the creep formation. Simply click to attack an enemy hero while you're standing near their creeps, and the creeps will shift their attention to you. Immediately walk back towards your range creep, and repeat this as needed to get their melee creeps on top of your range creep for an easy deny. The reason why ranged creeps are so valuable in lane is because they provide more gold and slightly more experience than melee creeps. Liberally using your spells is exactly what it sounds like. Spam your battle hungers, anchor smashes, and quill sprays with the intention of whittling down enemy heroes. These spells can also be used to secure last hits if the enemies happen to be denying well. For optimal mana usage, you should typically wait until you have at least 2 points in any skill. Like with playing supports, you're trading your mana for their HP. The other trade that you'll find yourself making is with auto attacks. I don't necessarily advise cores to trade auto attacks with supports early on, but you should trade auto attacks with the enemy carry. Again, make the enemy carry burn through their regeneration items and keep them away from the creep wave. Continue to play aggressively and annoyingly into the mid game. Take advantage of your bulkiness by establishing map control. You can push creep waves into enemy towers, forcing your enemies to react defensively. You can sweep through the enemy jungle with your supports to hunt down easy kills. You can even link up with your ally mid to strengthen your assault. Take up as much space on the enemy's side of the map as you can, but be careful not to bite off more than you can chew. For offlane heroes, I recommend Axe, Bristleback, Tidehunter, Underlord, and Undying. All of these heroes are menacing with their tankiness, abilities to stick to enemy heroes, and generally annoying playstyles with spammable spells. On Axe, ease into the lane slowly with a couple of points of battle hunger. And then after you have a couple of points in counter helix, you can even disrupt the enemy support on their pole camp. On Bristleback, keep an eye on your opponent's Quill Spray debuff duration. If they're hanging back because they already have a couple of stacks, it's worth venturing forward to see if you can apply an additional stack while refreshing the duration. On Tidehunter, 2 points in Kraken Shell will provide tremendous value in the lane. How early you get those 2 points will be determined by how difficult your lane is, so you make the call. On Underlord, don't waste additional mana at early levels by combining Pit of Malice with your Firestorm if you're just harassing. Firestorm on its own will be plenty of harassment until you're ready to attempt a kill. On Undying, you can find success with a variety of playstyles, but I recommend maxing Tombstone and using it to initiate engagements. Zombies are especially effective before players have upgraded boots. Finally, to ensure a decent laning phase, your items should include things like bracers, a wand, and maybe even a falcon blade or an HP regeneration item that builds into Pipe, Greaves, or Crimson Guard. I believe that Pipe of Insight will provide the most benefit to you in the majority of your games because you will likely be the first target that the enemies see, and they'll most likely throw every spell in their arsenal at you. Since your build will typically provide earlier HP regeneration than what the enemy carry will have, you can recover from your skirmishes quicker than them, allowing you to harass them even more. Arcane Boots are worthwhile on nearly every offlaner, and if you need a bit of additional mana before getting your Arcane Boots, try carrying a Mango. With Axe, Phase Boots are typical because he benefits from the additional armor. Speaking of Axe, Blade Mail is incredibly potent and should be built early in every game. It can also help you farm in the jungle. Underlord has a nasty combination with Rod of Atos, guaranteeing an additional route within Pit of Malice. First, use Pit of Malice, then Rod of Atos, and then the enemy will be snared by the pit for a third time. As a mid laner, your job can be anything from being the backbone of a push to being a secondary carry. This is typically achieved by playing at a quick pace that catches the opponents off guard and is mostly facilitated through rune control. A few things to remember when playing mid are that you should not be reliant on allied support, that you should gank and rotate, and that you should itemize to suit your strengths. I say that you shouldn't rely on your supports because I see an all too common complaint about, their mid got ganks while my supports did nothing. Look, that's just one of the things that you should expect when you play Dota. Whoever you're facing, no matter the lane, may get more help than you. Always plan to survive through your own means rather than expecting help from teammates, unless they've explicitly communicated otherwise to you. In the middle lane, this means getting a couple of observers for yourself in the early portion of the game. Grab one before the game begins and place it before bounty runes spawn. The other ward should be ferried to you around the 4 or 5 minute mark and placed before the 6-minute rune spawn. For the second ward, place it towards the side that you're most worried about being ganked from. If you're greedy, you can place observers to see atop the enemy mid-stairs as well as the river rune. However, if you're concerned about it being dewarded, you can shift it further back. Speaking of dewarding, don't be so greedy that you can't buy your own sentry or two. If you suspect that the enemy has vision in the area, then it's worth buying a sentry to check. You'll make your gold back if you kill an observer ward anyway. When it comes to rotation and ganks, play to your hero's strengths. A hero like Queen of Pain can obviously gank with more ease than a hero like Viper because she's incredibly mobile. I recommend waiting until the 6-minute mark and the first power rune before ganking. This should coincide with level 6 on your hero and grant you a massive power spike. If you don't have level 6 yet, consider holding onto the rune until you do. If you don't get the rune, or it's not an amplified damage, haste, or invisibility, you can still gank if you see that a couple of enemies are playing deep into their lane with low HP. There are also times when you can't or shouldn't gank. If you are applying an immense amount of pressure and keeping the enemy mid-hero low, then that same double damage or haste can be used to get a solo kill. Or if you're playing Sniper or Death Prophet and are constantly damaging the mid tower after persistent wave clearing, then consider staying in the lane to finish the tower off before ganking. I want everyone to understand that ganking is not always the best possible play for a mid laner. However, if you are mid, then it is imperative that you let your team know when the enemy mid is missing. It's great if you stay put and take an 8-minute tower, but not at the cost of the enemy mid roaming for a double kill on your carry and support. Provide your team with information, have a teleport scroll in your inventory, and be prepared to teleport to a lane for a counter gank. Finally, my advice to itemize to suit your strengths is meant to focus you on becoming effectively unkillable or the most effective killer. Don't get caught up in trying to fill some utility role for your team with a bunch of clever item counters. If you're playing Sniper, then your team is counting on you to provide damage from afar. Items like Hurricane Pike and Maelstrom are ideal for this. If you're playing Death Prophet, then you can rely on Crypt Swarm spam and your ultimate to be your offensive threats. Items like Ewell Scepter and Shiva's Guard will make you more survivable and allow you to navigate teamfights for longer. My recommended heroes for mid are Sniper, Viper, Death Prophet, Lina, and Zeus. These heroes are all powerful when playing on the high ground in mid, and they can exert a lot of pressure on their opponents. On Sniper, use Shrapnel to make it difficult for your opponent to secure last hits, and if they're relatively low HP when you reach level 6, then you can use your ultimate to bully them out of the lane. Just make sure to let your teammates know when the enemy mid is missing. On Viper, you can settle for your poison attack merely keeping the opponent away from the creep wave. You do not have to commit to kills until level 6. On Death Prophet, try to siege a tier 1 tower with every early use of your ultimate. It's highly likely that you will destroy their mid tower and then their 2 remaining outer towers with your first 3 ultimates. On Lina, max your Dragon Slave and make an effort to combine striking the opposing mid with last hitting your range creep. This will prevent it from being denied, and this is a good tactic to keep in mind for many spellcasters with nukes, including the next hero. On Zeus, I recommend an Aghanims and a Refresher build. This is the safest way to play the hero, and you'll still deal insane amounts of damage if you skip Phylactery. The best items vary a great deal on mid heroes, but you should always build a Hurricane Pike on a ranged auto attacker, and you can solve many mana issues while providing some security if you build a Ewell Scepter on spellcasters. Ewells can be used on a single enemy that is running you down, or on yourself if you're in a bad position in the middle of a team fight. As the safe lane carry on your team, you must know how to control the lane, not be greedy, and, most importantly, have an impact in the game. Controlling the lane is a skill that you will hone over time so that you can maximize your gold and experience regardless of what the enemies or your support are doing. The primary tactic used for controlling the lane is creep aggro. It's very similar to what we discussed with offlaners. The simple rule to keep in mind is do not let your opponents deny your creeps. If your creeps are taking damage and enemy heroes are standing close to them, aggro them back towards your tower until you've separated them from your enemies. Again, don't worry about what your support is doing unless you can make an easy play for a kill. Focus on last hitting and staying healthy in lane. The next tip is to not be greedy. This is mostly concerning your health regeneration. Never skip tangos in your starting items, and consider that a magic stick will almost always be worthwhile for HP upkeep. If you find yourself chewing through your tangos quickly, don't hesitate to buy another set or a healing salve. The important thing is to not die. If you do die, not only will you lose some gold upon death, but you'll also lose potential gold gains from missed creeps. A bracer is a fine item for any carry, even an agility one, if you'd like a little more bulk in the lane. It's worth spending money to stay alive and to remain present in the lane. You will make the gold back later. Finally, as the carry, you have to have an impact in the game. This obviously means that you can't spend the whole game farming creeps until you feel adequately prepared, because that moment may never even come. If your hero has powerful spells, such as Luna with her ultimate, don't be afraid to join fights. You should prioritize farming, but keep an eye on the map for nearby fights or a skirmish that you can TP to. A trap that some carry players fall into is feeling strong after winning a few engagements and then taking the next one without their ultimate or Black King bar available. Then they usually feed and turn over a big gold bounty. Stick to farming while important spells and items are on cooldown. Also, don't just farm the jungle, you have to farm creep waves. For one thing, they're worth more gold, but you'll also create a shift in momentum in the lane and send creeps towards the enemy towers. Keep working on your minimap awareness and you'll feel more confident about farming in lanes. For strong or survivable heroes, I recommend Dragon Knight, Wraith King, Gyrocopter, Luna, Medusa, Phantom Lancer, and Sniper. On Dragon Knight, use his Fire Facet to rapidly farm and push towers early with his ultimate. On Wraith King, take his Skeleton Facet and watch as they shove down any lane that your opponents aren't guarding. They can make really quick work of towers. On Gyrocopter, if the lane is tough, try maxing Flat Cannon first. Even when you don't have many items, Flat Cannon provides excellent harassment from a safe distance. On Luna, get Hurricane Pike and Manta Style, and watch as your glaives do the work during sieges. On Medusa, get Arcane Boots. Because your mana pool is essentially your health, restoring your mana is what will keep you alive. On Phantom Lancer, take the Divergence Facet, build a Fusel Blade, and spam your Spirit Lance. You will be one of the most annoying heroes in Dota. Whether you play Sniper from mid or from the safe lane, your goal is the same. Stay behind your team, provide vision with shrapnel, and deal damage from as far away as possible. Itemizing on carries should not be overcomplicated. When you need an item for survivability, it's almost always going to be Black King Bar. When you need an item to provide the biggest damage spike possible, it's probably going to be Daedalus unless your hero already has built-in crit. How you play your carry is going to determine more match outcomes than your specific builds. Remember to prioritize farm, but assist your team by participating in team fights when your strongest abilities are available. If you happen to be playing a carry like Phantom Lancer, whose abilities are always available, then let your team know how close you are to getting your next item. This suggestion is somewhat arbitrary, but if your next item is less than 1,000 gold away, you should prioritize farming. If you've recently obtained your item, then you should feel confident in joining a team fight and making a significant impact. I'll end this video with a few extra tips for all roles. Continue to practice on simple heroes or heroes that you are already familiar with. Focusing on improving your fundamentals will be more beneficial to ranking up than becoming proficient with a wide variety of heroes. Become more self-sufficient and don't blame your teammates. I've abstained from speaking harshly in this video, but the blunt truth is that until you've proven otherwise, you are just as bad at Dota as they are. Can other players' mistakes lose you games? Certainly. However, if you consistently play better than the average player at your rank, you will win more games than you lose, and you will eventually level up. On that note, it's important to have some perspective when playing Dota. As much as we all wish to win the vast majority of our games, it simply doesn't happen. A great record on a player's profile would be a 53% win rate. But when that's played out over 100 games, you see that it only translates to 53 wins and 47 losses, or a +6 win differential. It sounds so mediocre that after playing 100 games, you've only won 6 more times than you lost. But it's realistic, and it is good enough to climb the ranks. I mentioned communicating to your teams a couple of times in this video already. I've heard people recommend that you should instantly mute everyone at the start of every match and play your own game because they supposedly don't know how to play any better than you do, but I would hesitate to go to such extremes. You can mute disagreeable players, for sure, but keep lines of communication open at the start. Some people might ask for advice or give you important information about their builds or the enemy heroes. You should also communicate those things to your team, and notify them of your important spell cooldowns too. More information never hurts. Something that I witness all too often is a gank happening in some portion of the map, let's say your jungle for example, and a teammate dying there. For some reason, too many people think, oh, the enemies wouldn't stay in that area, they got their kill and now they'll go back to farming or split up in the lanes. And then whoever thinks that walks into the jungle and dies in the same area as their teammate. Stop going to the areas where you or your teammates were just killed. Unless you're absolutely certain that you will enter that area with more numbers than them, just don't do it. Back on the topic of being good team players, I want to reiterate that you don't have to wait for your supports to place observer wards. If you are a carry and you want a part of the map illuminated to feel safe, or if you're a mid player and want to keep tabs on the runes, then get your own wards. If anything, your support will appreciate you for doing it. Similarly, no one player is responsible for getting the healing lotuses in laning phase. Both the supports and the cores should make an effort to obtain the lotus every 3 minutes. If I'm talking about lotuses, then I may as well mention wisdom runes. Remember, these spawn every 7 minutes in either team's respective offlane. It doesn't really matter who picks these up, just make sure that yours is obtained every 7 minutes. If you're the mid player and you can't trust your team to get the 14-minute wisdom rune, then do it yourself. Finally, notice how I never mentioned that one role is more important than the others, or that some roles are easy to play and others are difficult. Every role is integral to winning, and you can influence the game in your favor no matter which one you play. And that wraps up my first tips video for beginners and low-level players. I hope that the information was concise and made sense to everyone watching. If you have any questions at all, please ask them in the comments section and I'll be sure to answer you. Not every piece of advice given in this video is suitable for all levels. I purposefully simplified many concepts for the benefit of the intended audience. Is Phantom Lancer a better carry than Alchemist right now? Not necessarily, but I feel like a Guardian player might be more impactful on Phantom Lancer than on Alchemist. In my next video, I'll be looking at a few low-level replays and highlighting examples of the suggestions that I made today. If you would like to assist me and play a direct role in the next video, then please leave a match ID in the comments section if you are anywhere between Herald and Crusader, and I may use it for the next lesson. Following that lesson, I'll be releasing a tips video for the middle ranks, so stay tuned to the channel if you're looking for help between Crusader and Legend. Thank you everyone for watching, good luck in your next games, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.